The following program is brought to you by TZ Productions, celebrating KPTS's nearly 50 years of community support in South Central Kansas. Great starts here on KPTS.
This is the program where you make it happen. When you are a guest on this show, it means you have an interesting story to tell and a life worth noting. This week, we go one-on-one with one of the best-known names on the Wichita State campus. That name is Dr. Jim Rhatigan, who became the nation's youngest dean of students when he was appointed to the job in 1965. Rhatigan was born and raised in a small town in Iowa and earned a bachelor's degree at Coe College and later a master's from Syracuse University and a PhD from the University of Iowa. During his time at Syracuse, he was a residence hall director, and that's where he discovered his passion for helping students. Rhatigan then went on to earn a doctorate in personnel administration. By 1970, he became WSU's Vice President of Student Affairs. He has won many awards, and students often credit their success at WSU to Dr. Rhatigan. And now for several years, Wichita State Students Center bears the name Rhatigan Student Center. Colleagues say Rhatigan has always had the ability to connect with students, and caring seems to be a recurring word you hear when talking about him. You are about to hear the rest of this amazing story about one of the most respected personalities on the campus of Wichita State University. So stay tuned as we go one-on-one with Dr. James J. Rhatigan right now. Thank you for joining me. I'm Victor Hogstrom, and I'm very pleased to welcome the influential Dr. James Rhatigan. Welcome to the program.
Good seeing you.
Now, you are retired. How are you really doing these days?
I'm doing great. I'm not really retired. It's true, I don't get paid anymore, but I work pretty much every day.
Who's working you like that?
Well, I like to work. And I have a healthy wife. She does her thing, and my daughter's gone. Everybody's busy, so I could either sleep in front of the TV or go to work.
So is work the continuation of work, is that essential to retirement?
It's essential to my mental health, though. And right now I still raise money, not as much as I did when I was working for the foundation, and I still write. I'm writing a chapter of a book right now with the dean of students from Stanford on the dean of students, the role of dean of students, which we both were back in our day.
Mm-hmm. So do you miss being in the midst of the action of a regular job, career?
Definitely not. It's a lot more fun to comment on what people are doing than actually be doing it yourself.
Why is that?
Well, all controversy is a little more intense if you're in the middle of it, but to comment on it, it's kind of a pleasure, really.
So you grew up in Iowa.
I did. Mm-hmm.
Went to college, your first college in Iowa, and then on to New York, and back to Iowa for your PhD.
Right.
And you studied student management, so to speak.
Student personnel administration is what it was called in the day. That PhD program has been absorbed into a larger set of preparations than in my day, but I really enjoyed it.
So upon receiving your PhD, you moved to Wichita. How did you get
Well, I was fortunate because I got hired at Iowa as an assistant dean of men while I was pursuing my doctoral degree. It took longer that way, but after 5 years, I was 29 years old, I'd already had 5 years of experience. So I applied for deans of students jobs, and I got the one at Wichita State. So I came here, I was 29 years old and 11 months.
One of the youngest dean of
right, I was
in the country.
Yeah, right. I was the youngest dean of students in the nation for schools 10,000 and above, And 5 years later, I was still the youngest one. Then I turned 36 and I lost my distinction.
And you became old.
Yeah, right.
Is that what it is?
Right, and I didn't comment it on anymore. Now I'm the oldest this and the oldest that. Things change.
How did you feel as the youngest dean of students?
I never gave it any thought. I really never even thought about that. All my colleagues seemed to be about the same age, and so I was just 2 or 3 years younger.
When you were growing up in Iowa, what was your dream or your aspiration? What did you want to become?
Well, back in my day, I don't know that I had a dream like that at all. I didn't know if I was going to go to college, and so my aspiration was to get to college. And so I went to Coe College in Iowa, in Cedar Rapids. I really, really enjoyed that. I had a bachelor's degree in American history, and then what? So I had to think about it. So I applied for law school at the University of Iowa. I was admitted, but there was no scholarship involved. And then my dean of men at Coe suggested Syracuse, where they had a program where I could get a degree there, and they'd pay the whole thing. So for about $5,000 a year, I changed my entire career there. So I have a master's degree in American history. But it was there that I discovered how much I enjoyed working with students, because I was a residence hall person.
Right.
That's a common upward entry-level job for the student affairs people. And, the Hayes-Tilden election is one thing, but kid with a problem is another thing. So I decided, well, my interests really lie with the students and their issues. So I decided, where could I go for doctoral programs? And Iowa was just starting one in student affairs, and so I went there.
So tell me about your proudest moment as dean of students.
I've never thought about that. I think my proudest series of moments are the people that work for me that went on to work in student affairs and other campuses, like the vice presidents of Penn State, Pitt, Virginia, Arkansas, Toledo.
You mentored them.
Yes. 2 of them became college presidents. 3 of them became full professors at Big 12 schools. I really had some great people working with me, and so the way they left me and moved on is probably one of the high points of my, if I'm ever feeling good about myself, that would come to my mind.
But one of the things that you did not mention is that during your tenure as dean of students, it was during the riot days in America when students on college campuses were rioting for one reason or another. But it didn't happen here at Wichita State during your tenure. No. Why is it? What did you do differently?
Well, I couldn't take credit for that, but one thing we did do was we had a group of protesting students, and I always said, I'll support you in every way, providing you don't break the law. And I didn't even really think of that. I didn't want them to injure their total careers by their protesting. So they kept me informed of what they were going to do, and I stayed in close contact with them. Plus, a hidden advantage was I was more or less in sympathy with their views.
Dr. Rhatigan, you've been here in Wichita with the university some 53 years and counting. What has been the most dramatic moment in your life at that university?
Well, the answer to this is easy. The most dramatic moment was when I was conducting a workshop in Kansas City, and I got a call from President Alberg that one of our planes heading for Utah had gone down, and apparently had crashed. And so I left immediately and came back to the campus, and for the next X hours, everybody was trying to pitch in and do what they could. We did a lot of things well in response to that crash, and there were some things you didn't do so well because you were not prepared for the trauma that was part of that event. I will say that in an odd way, it was actually probably the greatest moment of community that I've seen on campus and off campus. Eventually that dissipated, but for a long time people were focused on the survivors and their survivors' families. One thing I did that was an outcome of that, about 6 weeks later, the Marshall plane went down. And so I was at home, and so I went up to the campus, and I found the Dean of Students at Marshall in my directory for student affairs people. In those days, people had their phone numbers listed, so I called and got his wife. I was able to find him at Marshall. And so we were able to help Marshall through this tragedy by telling them that what worked well for us and that what we wished we would have done better. And because of that, I kept on doing that. So in my career, I played that role with Texas A&M, Oklahoma State, Virginia Tech, Northern Illinois, ones I can remember. Actually, I called not just athletics, but wherever I saw multiple death, which I said really started at 4 students or more, 4 people or more. That was what I would call a multiple death. Campuses are going to have severe consequences, none of which are known. They all have no idea what they're going to be entering into. So being able to help in that manner was one thing I was able to do over the years. But as to the dramatic moment, that moment changed a lot of lives in our community.
How did it affect you personally?
Seriously. I don't even like to talk about it really, because it brings out emotions that are severe.
So with all of those challenges and complications, what did you enjoy about working with students?
Well, so this is a long answer, but I would say in the core of maybe what you're looking for is sometimes the university is nothing more than you and the student sitting in front of you. And that's why I got hired. And we're talking about the education of the whole student, but students came to see me was for a very specific reason. And you either helped or you didn't. And you got a reputation for that, or they wouldn't come back. I would say that about 1/3 of my visits with students were positive. They were looking to go to school somewhere, they needed a letter or whatever. About 1/3 were administrative. The university had messed them up in their schedule or some administrative problem like that. But about 1/3 I would call dealt with students who were broken in spirit. They were maybe, it was possibly for a short period of time, but they had to be attended to because their brokenness had severe consequences.
So what would you describe as your proudest moments, your proudest accomplishments working with these students over the years?
Well, I think probably the proudest moment is that I look back and I don't have any regrets. I got along well with all kinds of students, all kinds of presidents, faculty. So I think if you have an orientation toward life, people recognize it. And if you're positive, trying to do things that are positive, people recognize that and they respond accordingly. And that's pretty much the way I tried to live.
You know, every time one speaks with one of your former students, the key word that is used is compassion that you show to them.
Mm-hmm. I believe that, and the psychological factor behind compassion is empathy. Empathy is a gift and a curse, because people that have empathy invest in other people and are rewarded for that. But occasionally I help a student, in my opinion, all they need to do is walk through the door, but they couldn't walk through the door. So then I suffered for that. Didn't I do the job? What happened? And so compassion is in short supply these days, in my opinion.
So then how do you compare and contrast compassion with discipline? Because when you deal with students, some have to be disciplined.
Yeah. Well, they go together. The historic role for a dean of students is discipline. And this is a long story. It goes back to the days of the colonial college, and the dean, there were no deans in those days. The faculty were the disciplinarians. And but later on, the dean of students took over the problem, because the president, who had been the moral leader of the campus became the fundraiser and became diverted. So deans of students took on the discipline role. But I looked at discipline this way, Victor. There's discipline is punishment. Sometimes that's necessary. There's discipline as rehabilitation. Yes, you messed up, but let's see what we can do to repair that. But the goal of discipline is self-discipline. And so that's the goal of everybody who works in discipline. But once in a while, I had to separate a student from the university. Usually it took a lot, violence against another student or long-term bad behavior. But even then, I would say, now, I'm separating you for 2 years, but I'm going to be the first guy you see when you come back in 2 years, and you live a better life than some did and some didn't.
You are an author. You've written several articles and books, and you're currently working on a chapter with other authors.
Right.
What is your message? What is that quote that you live by?
Oh, well, my writing was more eclectic. That it didn't all pertain to that, but you know, you can put your life in very small principles, and some of them are biblical, and some of them are learned behavior as a dean of students. Mm-hmm. Here's where the empathy factor comes into play. I would want for you what I would want for myself. So I try to treat you accordingly. Now, some people you can trust, and I have a high trust index in my life, so I've been conned more than once. But I'd rather be that way than be cynical and unapproachable. Mm-hmm. And so the overriding ethic in student affairs is an ethic of caring. How can we make your life better? That's pretty much guided me throughout.
So you aim to help make the lives of others better.
Right.
That's remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
There are not too many people like you.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are. They're there. And
there are people, but not too many.
Yeah. So I had the virtue of high visibility, but my admiration goes out to the high school counselor, to the social worker, to people who work in depressing circumstances where the hope for something better isn't always so clear. Mm-hmm. By the time a student gets to college, there's pretty much a hope that they can do better.
What do you see, Doctor, as the greatest challenge facing deans of students today in the United States and the students themselves? Mm-hmm.
Well, I would say the students are the same today as they were in my day. What's different is the circumstances in which they live. In my day, there were no email, no Skype, no
cell phones?
No cell phones of any kind, and no electronic assistance that people get today, no iPads, nothing like that.
It was the old-fashioned library.
Right, the old-fashioned library, which I still prefer this very day. But today, I went to a dentist about 2 weeks ago, and sitting about 3 feet from me was, I'd say, a 5-year-old kid. And he was there, obviously, with his grandfather, and this little boy had a computer. And of the 30 minutes I sat there for my appointment, that young little boy didn't look up at all. He was totally absorbed with his computer. And fine as it may be, this is a concern to me. I just wrote this in the book as I was writing this very week. I said to myself, how many times does the dean of students have to say, just as when I visited you, excuse me, I have to take this call? Mm-hmm. Well, that happens X times for a dean of students, but when you take that call, that may not be the end of the issue that you're calling about, or the call you're receiving, but it adds to the pressure of your day. So this extra communication and ease of it is partly a curse, because to have to act without reflection is very stressful.
Well, there's something remarkable that has happened in your life also, and that is the Student Center at Wichita State University is named in your honor, and that, you will agree, is an unusual trend,
Yeah.
especially for someone who is still alive.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That's the main virtue of it, that in my life I'm still living.
So how did you pull that off?
Well, I didn't really have anything to do with it, but students are responsible for that.
Oh, wow.
And they found a sympathetic president, and everything stemmed from that. And then when the president called in and said, "Jim, I got something I need to tell you," and he told me, I was pretty much totally surprised by this, flabbergasted, really.
Wow.
Even though I go by the building with my name on it, doesn't really seem real to me.
That means you have to always behave yourself now.
Yeah,
right?
you won't be finding me in the reflection pool in Washington D.C. with Wilbur Mills. Yeah. So first, I guess they thought I was old enough that it was safe.
Oh, wow. You, after serving as dean of students, you switched careers. You became a fundraiser for the university. Tell us about that. How did that go?
Well, I looked ahead to my retirement, and I thought, well, there's more that I can do. And so I thought, well, there are two things I could do. One, I want to possibly be a counselor, advisor in University College, which at the time was a freshman division of the university. Or I might try my hand at fundraising. Because by the time I did that, I was already almost 70 years old. And so I knew a lot of people, which is really an advantage in fundraising. So I approached the foundation and asked for a half-time job, and I got that. And I really enjoyed that part of my career tremendously. I was successful at it, in my opinion.
And some of your former students speak very highly of you. I'm sure you have some interesting stories to tell about some of them.
Right.
One of them that comes to mind is Carla Burns.
Yes.
What's her story? What's that interesting story about Carla?
Well, Carla came to see me one day, and she was concerned because she had gotten a teaching job in Johnson County somewhere, and she really wanted to be a performer, but this is a very good job. Her mother tended toward the job. And so the day I saw Carla, I said to her, it's none of my business, but I would tilt toward the performance aspect of your career, because if you want to be a performer, even if you're a failure, quote unquote, in financial terms, you can use those experiences as a teacher, the things that you tried to do and what worked out and what didn't. Mm-hmm. And she had an opportunity to go to Houston to work with an opera company down there. And she did that, and she told me that, and she's told me that many times. That was an important day in her life. And so that would be one student I could point to.
Right.
She turned out to be a worldwide success.
Well, you know, they say that for every successful man, there's a successful wife. And your wife is Beverly. What role does she play in your life?
Well,
and in your career?
Yeah, well, Beverly has always been a stabilizing force. I mean, I get too high, I mean, she might remind me that I'm still just an ordinary guy. But when I'm low, she's a person that would pick you up. Mm-hmm. She also sees things pretty clearly. When you're in the forest, she might say, well, yes, but here, have you thought of it another way? And so she's been my rock and foundation. I've been married since 1962.
Well, congratulations.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
We play a little game once in a while on this program. Not once in a while, but more often than once in a while. And I'd like to play one with you.
Is it safe?
It's safe.
All right, go ahead.
It is a word association game, and please tell me the first thing that comes to mind when I say a word to you, and tell me why. Are you ready?
I am.
All right. First word, knowledge.
Success.
Why?
If you have it, it opens doors that otherwise would not be available to you.
Compassion.
Joy. I believe that a person who is able to identify with with the human venture is going to live a happy life and a joyful life. And so I link those two together.
Love.
Love is the foundation. We're in the Christian community, we are told that only three things in life abide, and one of those is love. Love, faith, and hope.
Students.
Essence of my life.
Kansas.
Beg your pardon?
Kansas.
A good place to live.
Work.
The essential part of my life is work. I think this is where you have the greatest opportunity to make a contribution to the world you live in, is work.
Iowa.
A great place to be from. My wife and I both grew up in Iowa, but if you've been through an Iowa winter, Kansas winter is kind of a piece of cake when you compare the two.
So Iowa is a great place to be from, Kansas is a great place to live.
Right. When we moved here, we immediately set Kansas as the northern border for any other job I might take.
Oh. College.
College is hope. If you go to college, doors will open. They won't open equally for everybody in every way, but it is the greatest vehicle we've ever known as a society to advancement.
And the last word is riots.
Riots. That's how people respond to my jokes.
Why is that?
Well, they're just that bad.
So, Dr. Rhatigan, what is most important to you in life?
Well, the most important thing is breathing. This is essential to life. But I think if you have the life that I had, you have to stay involved. I don't want to be in the middle of things. I'm too old to be in the middle of things, but I want to be on the scene to do what I can do.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you.
Victor, good seeing you.
And thank you for watching this edition of One-on-One. If you have a question or comment about the program, please email us oneonone@kpts.org. You can also stream past episodes at kpts.org. I'm Victor Hogstrom. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time for another interesting conversation.
The preceding program was brought to you by TZ Productions, supporting KPTS and the communities it serves in South Central Kansas. Great starts here on KPTS.
Call KPTS to receive a DVD copy of this program for a $40 donation. You can also send a check or money order along with the program name, date, and time to the address on your screen. And you will receive a 1-year KPTS membership.